Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. Before I plunge in with the questions, I am going to just mention one or two entertaining things which I have done this week, and show you one or two photographs. The first is of Mickey and Aurora at Buckingham Palace in the car with the parked in the quadrangle with the public face of the palace, you know, the place that you see when you are at the Mall, visible in the background. Then I rather naughtily, I have to say, breached protocol because I was also asked to something at the Austrian embassy, which was a very, very fascinating presentation by Dr. Karina Erbach, who is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful writer. Her book, The Go-Betweens, is pure heaven on earth. And she is a senior research fellow at the Institute of Historical Research at London University. She is the wife of the wonderful Professor Jonathan Haslam, who was also in attendance. She presented a very interesting, unfortunately, I missed most of it, a very interesting conversation between Angela Allen, who was involved with the filming of The Third Man, the famous movie, the Harry Lime movie, with Michael Rennie and Orson Welles, and Sir Roderick Braithwaite, who was the British ambassador in Russia and went to Vienna in 1951 as an 18-year-old conscript in the British Army and worked at a secret listening station because Austria was nearly gobbled up by the Soviet Union, and the talk was about Austria from the end of the Second World War to the Austrian State Treaty in 1955 and the British occupation of Vienna, and how the Austrians managed to avoid being gobbled up by the Soviet Union. I caught the tail end of it, and then, of course, I was there for the reception afterward. I really wanted to hear the presentation and the grilling, intellectual grilling, wonderful. But I was at Buckingham Palace, and then I very naughtily slipped out before I should have. So I'm not going to say what I was doing there or who the royal was or anything, because I was really naughty. You're not supposed to leave until after the royals leave. And I left before to catch the Austrian event, which was held at the Austrian ambassador's residence in Belgrave Square. So that was interesting. And I also went to a fascinating luncheon at the Kennel Club to celebrate the 37th birthday of the filmmaker, stylist. She's doing a movie at the moment about Shakespeare, and she is regarded as one of the best dressed women and the most stylish women in England. Amanda Eliasch, who celebrated her 37th birthday. I think she said she's 24, but she's lying, she's 37. I'm speaking the truth. And I very naughtily captured her giving a little speech of welcome to everybody, because it was held at the Kennel Club, and she has whippets, and it was a circle of dog lovers and fashionistas, some incredibly dressed people in the sort of heist sort of I'm trying to find the right word, the most chic and fashionable and sometimes ultra fashionistas who view fashion as an art form, and some of them were incredibly dressed. And aside from that, there were some really fascinating people there, because Amanda's a very interesting person and she has a very interesting circle of friends. And those of you who'd like to look can actually see her on YouTube. She has her own YouTube channel, Amanda Eliasch. So then that was also great fun. And Mickey and Aurora were in attendance. They were. And everybody commented on how well behaved they were. So without further ado, I am going to ask Sean to publish all the photographs as well as Amanda's short speech, and then I will plunge in with at the end. Okay, so
John, shut up.
Take three.
Okay. Listen. No profanity. Every year, I like to give myself a hard thing to climb, and one of the hardest things to climb in life socially is the Kennel Club. Okay, the Kennel Club, which we're sitting in now, is such an honour because everybody here, other than us, are actually huge breeders, huge. I suppose they're huge people who make the dog world a success that it is today. And really, I shouldn't be here at all because I've just got a few whippets. But I am here, and that's because at the beginning of the year I thought I've got to get to the Kennel Club, and so here I am. And next year I'm going to be running.
And you better give my dogs number one.
They're all appalled.
So, to get down to the nitty-gritty, Susan Scherer says, Lady C, good grief, have you seen these headlines? Dreadful. Meghan Markle and Prince Harry host Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola pelts at Montecito dinner party amid family drama. Don't believe a word of it. It's not true. They were all asked long before the blow-up involving the 50th birthday party of of our David Beckham. They were all asked to the head of Paramount, who is a neighbour of the Sussexes in Montecito, and he and his wife were hosting a dinner party for, I believe it's 20 people. And Nicola Peltz Beckham has ambitions to become a star, and doubtless Brooklyn Beckham, who has tried his hand at various things, wouldn't mind being something either. And Harry and Meghan were asked. Now, I believe it is true that Meghan and Harry sympathized with Brooklyn and Nicola Beckham, and I only hope for their sake that they do not accept any offers from Meghan to show them how to handle the situation, because that will be Brooklyn Beckham kissing goodbye to his family until such time as he and his wife Nicola are divorced. There are not that many parallels between the situations, even though there are many parallels between the women's personalities. I make that point for what it's worth. Of course, Nicola has achieved her objective, which is to be on everybody's tongue. It's really interesting how fame junkies nowadays don't care whether they become famous or infamous, as long as they are on everybody's lips. Unbelievable. But yes, I've seen the headlines. They're not accurate. And of course, the Beckhams are really very upset about the whole thing. I suspect the one person who isn't at all upset about it, although I have no doubt she will act that she is as if she were upset about it, is Nicola Peltz Beckham. I have to tell you, one needs to be so careful when one is dealing with people whose ambitions for fame and or fortune come before their ambition to be a good and dutiful person, daughter, daughter-in-law, son, etc., etc. Let's see what happens in the next few years. I leave it at that. Rose Gregory says, Dear Lady C, isn't the monarch breaking the law by not having proof like every other royal that Meghan actually gave birth and then allowing them to be called prince and princess and being in the line of succession? It doesn't make much difference how it's worded. There is no proof out there that a doctor that says she gave birth to either child. It's still lying by omission. Thank you. Well, of course, there are sins of commission and there are sins of omission. And Meghan's very good at the omission part of sinning. She's really good at throwing the idea out there and getting someone else. Remember with Oprah? Well, the message, well, I haven't really said it, but since you said it, well, I have to, well, you said it. One tail left eye. You said it, yes, one tail left eye. Well, to be specific, no, the monarch isn't breaking the law. First of all, the monarch at the time was Queen Elizabeth II, so we can't park this vehicle at the depot of King Charles III. And Queen Elizabeth II wasn't breaking the law either. There is no specific law that states any longer that the Home Secretary has to be present for the birth of a royal baby. Between 1688 and 1936, every royal woman who gave birth to a child had to have that birth witnessed by the Home Secretary to ensure that there was no sleight of hand, there was no switching of babies, and that the royal woman had actually given birth to the actual child. This was stopped in 1936 following Princess Alexandra's birth, because nobody could imagine that a situation such as has arisen could ever possibly arise, namely that any royal woman could be suspected of having falsified a pregnancy and a birth. But there is no specific law that states at the moment that there has to be a valid witness, because it was always assumed and was always the custom, both before Archie's birth and subsequent to Archie's birth, that the royal obstetricians and the royal medical staff would be in attendance, and therefore there could be no doubt because the births were properly witnessed. This did not happen in the case of Archie or Lily. But because there's no specific law in place, no specific law has been broken. There should be proof, and the proof should be furnished the way it always has been by the royal family to the citizens of the realms of which the child is a potential monarch. It's not happened, it still hasn't happened, and don't think, though, that there isn't quite a lot of debate behind the scenes, because there is. I am assured that it is the most raised subject in correspondence between the public and the royal household. Of course, Harry and Meghan have asserted, and have the birth certificates to prove it, that they are the parents of those children. There are anomalies with both birth certificates, because the English birth certificate has been amended to remove Meghan's uniquely identifying features as mother. In other words, the message loud and clear is that the woman who gave birth to Archie was identified at the hospital as Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, but she was not Rachel Meghan, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Why? Because the Rachel Meghan was removed, and the only reason to remove it would be because the woman who gave birth to that child was not Rachel Meghan. Could there be another reason? Piggy's flying. Mr. Pickles comes to the rescue. And of course, Lily's birth certificate has anomalies because Harry and Meghan have stated as fact that that child was born in Santa Barbara. However, the birth certificate code is not the Californian code. It's the Colorado code. How does that one work? I just raise those questions as flagging up the complete inconsistencies that still exist and will continue to exist unless they are cleared up. And I, as a citizen of two realms to which those children are in the line of succession, and therefore heirs to the thrones of, it is my right to be assured that those children are validly in the line of succession to the thrones. So, I think we've covered this sufficiently for the moment, because it seems this is a topic that's evidently not going to be going away until it is cleared up. Susan Farabee says, Lady C, good morning from America. I've been watching your show regularly for a few years now. Thank you very much. And I absolutely think... Sorry. Forehead. Oh dear. Mickey, Aurora, I beg of you, come. Hit my head with your paws and let it stop being so swollen. I'm sorry. And I absolutely think you are wonderful. Love it. Thank you so much. I believe, though, you may be mistaken. So I'm now being corrected. When you said the late Queen was careful not to have a picture taken with either of Meghan's children, there is a very well-known picture of Queen Elizabeth, Prince Philip, and Doria all looking very proudly at Archie as an infant. Yes, there is. I assumed that everyone would have realized that I meant that after that picture was taken. And remember, that photograph was taken 2 days after Archie was officially born, before any of the anomalies and inconsistencies had washed up like so much rubbish on the Queen's shore. She didn't know at that time that there was anything untoward, any inconsistencies, anything that would have caused concern. So they briefly looked at the ostensibly sleeping infant, and that was it. Momentary. Thereafter, once the inconsistencies washed up on the Queen's shore and the rubbish had to be swept off her beach, she made sure that she was never photographed again with either of those children. She didn't go to Archie's christening. My surmising of the situation, this is a surmise as opposed to anything more concrete than that, but reading between the lines of what I have been told and what I have come to understand, it was not generally known beyond the questions being raised that at the most senior level, that there might be anything untoward or discomforting under discussion, and that there, and of course, until they had some idea which way the wind was blowing, so to speak. I need to be very decorous how I'm putting all of this. There was no need to promulgate the possibilities at all widely. So it would have caused no end of trouble. And so it's only later, when it became apparent how the tide had turned, that there would have been, I need to be careful how I put this, that there would have been a more expansive collaboration between relatively closely interested parties. So, obviously, I was not speaking about that photograph, and obviously I knew about it, but thank you for picking me up on it, Susan Farabee. Thanks for being so nice about me, and you have scolded me beautifully, and I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And now, Eliasch Campiletti says, fabulous name. So, Lady C, are you hinting the photo of Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth in very casual attire, looking at baby Archie with Doria, Meghan and Harry, was a shonky photoshopped con, as many of us think? No, I'm not. I'm not suggesting that. I'm certainly not ruling out any possibilities, but that's not one that I would have ruled in. I know a lot of people think that the photograph is possibly photoshopped. I wouldn't put anything past Meghan and Harry, let me tell you. Their conduct has shown me that they should be never absolved of the possibility of suspicion. But when people say, oh, the Queen and Prince Philip have on clothes that they otherwise would have worn, blah, 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 they were in the country, so to speak. They were at Windsor. Windsor is sort of in the country. It's rural to an extent, and it's urban. It's a town with a great estate, great parks, etc. So it's partly urban, partly rural. But country living does apply in Windsor Castle, as it does at Castle Goring. So, and both of them are very close to towns. So the fact that she and he were dressed in perfectly ordinary country clothes should not be a surprise. If they weren't on duty, it's a perfectly normal way to be dressed. So I make that point for what it's worth. We don't want to get so carried away that everything becomes a bone of contention and a source of conjecture. I would prefer to err on the side of giving Harry and Meghan, where it is possible, a break. Because, quite frankly, they've made it clear they, by and large, don't deserve any and shouldn't be getting any. But on the odd occasion that they do, and I will make the point, however, that if that photograph was indeed photoshopped, of course, the royal family wasn't going to leak that it was photoshopped. I make that point for what it's worth. I make the point as well, for what it's worth, that people speculate that at the christening of Archie, obviously, that William and Catherine were photoshopped into the photograph. No, they weren't. That event took place, and the people who were there were photographed. And, of course, this was still early days in terms of information gathering, and I leave it at that. Music Box Dancer says, didn't Queen Elizabeth find it odd that Meghan did not get her prenatal care from the royal doctors? The best prenatal care that one could buy, that would have raised a red flag for me. The palace also knew how Meghan worked, elevated herself as important, behaved and bullied the staff, and yet didn't say a word about how she was feeling or enjoying her pregnancy. She didn't swell and crouch down whilst 8 months pregnant in stiletto heels, yet no red flags were raised by the palace or the Queen. That in itself is odd, since most of the UK subjects had been talking about those red flags since Birkenhead, and also the reception in Morocco, where she entered with a mini bump and left with a 7 or 8 month bump. Just my observations. All well observed, but may I make the point that the royals lead very busy lives. Each royal has his or her own court, with his or her own staff and courtiers running his or her own show. It's like a series of theatrical productions. They don't live in each other's pockets. They're often so busy they don't even keep up with each other on a level, much less on the newspaper or social media level. What has happened with this matter is that it's people on social media, often who have the time and the interest and the perceptiveness and the intelligence and the confidence to trust their judgment, who spotted these anomalies. They spotted them long before I did, and I am here to tell you that they spotted them long before anybody in the royal world understood that there was speculation that had arisen as a result of Meghan's activities, which the people on social media who spotted these anomalies were seeing. But the people who were living all of this did not see it because they weren't on social media. They didn't notice any of this. And I know as a fact, from my own experience, that when all of this started, I discounted a lot of the observations without even bothering to examine them as just crazy talk and internet lunacy. It's only when you sit down and look at all the evidence that you begin to notice that things were odd. Otherwise, you wouldn't have noticed it. So, and why, in any event, would the Queen have concerned herself with Meghan's prenatal care from the royal doctors? Meghan was offered assistance and she systematically refused it. She refused the help of Lady Susan Hussey. She refused the help of Sophie, then Countess of Wessex, now Duchess of Edinburgh. She refused help left, right, and centre. She made it clear she was doing things her way and that she wasn't interested in doing things anybody else's way. She and Harry were going to do their own thing. That was actually very clever because she had already established the reputation of being something of a maverick and that she would forge her own path and do her own thing. So when she was forging that path, nobody thought it was anything out of the ordinary or suspicious. It was simply Meghan being awkward yet again. So, I hope that answers the question. Julie Lefebvre says, Dear Lady C, what, if anything, will be done to Meghan and Harry if it is proven that their children were born via surrogacy? I would think the Palace royal family would not take kindly to them perpetuating such a fraud. Also, do you think Meghan will ever regret that she gave up leaving the royal... Do you think Meghan will ever regret what she gave up by leaving the royal family? What I mean is, she would have been able to make a real difference by working with the Commonwealth and had the admiration she craves rather than being the joke she is. Thoughts? Thanks, Julie. Two separate questions. If the children were proven to be born of surrogates, do I see severe consequences for the Sussexes? Let's remember that's a big if. For legal reasons, I need to make it absolutely clear that I am not accusing either of them, nor would I entertain the possibility of accusing them of having perpetrated a fraud by faking a pregnancy and using a surrogate. I need to make that clear for legal reasons. But to answer your question as a supposition, if it were proven that the children were born via surrogacy, there would obviously be consequences. There is the worry that it could help to bring down the monarchy. So it's not something that anybody is going to lightly accuse them of doing. And in the event that it should emerge that some of the speculation had grounds, and if by some miracle, and I need to use this language for legal reasons, that in fact the suspicions that one can up to now discount as being anomalous conduct and mischief making on the part of Meghan and Harry, really to create sensations where there should be none. But if all of that turned out to be fallacious, and it could be, if it were proven, and again I say this is purely speculative, and should not be relied upon as being an accusation, of course there would be serious consequences. Serious. Do I think Meghan will ever regret what she gave up leaving the royal family? She's not going to admit it to anybody, including herself. And she has convinced herself that her lies about the way she was mistreated have sufficient merit that they should be respected. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, does she ever think, I think she is so far gone down the road of narcissism and Machiavellianism and antisocial tendencies that the small kernel of her core that is still intact and is capable of such a thought would be crushed by the remaining 98% of her personality. People like that, even when they have regrets, they talk themselves out of them, and because they have to maintain for their own existence that the facade they have built up over a period of decades is intact. So I don't think that she's the sort of person who will ever admit, even to herself. But I also think, from my experience of other narcissistic people with very similar tendencies to Meghan's, that there must be a 3 o'clock in the morning flicker across the brow of, did I? And then they crush it. That would be my take on it. Nina von Gunten says, my late mother's cousin was a member of the Secret Service team who was responsible for the Clintons' security. I must say that it was a rather interesting time during their tenure at the White House. There was never a dull moment. Well, my nephew by marriage guarded Bill Clinton. He also guarded Joe Biden. But he, of course, would never, ever, 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 ever say anything that I would ever be tempted to repeat. Never. It would be a breach of confidence. But I do know, having read Crisis of Character by Gary J. Byrne, that the Clintons, according to him, were little better than a combination of Don Vito Corleone and the Beverly Hillbillies. And that, according to his book, which was a worldwide bestseller and sat on the New York Times bestsellers list for ages, that the Clintons, both Bill and Hillary, are operators of the highest order. And you notice, when Meghan was in Britain and a part of the royal family, Hillary went and visited Meghan, but there's no interaction between Hillary and Meghan now. Why? Because the Clintons don't waste their time on losers. As simple as that. Give the Bidens credit, they wasted more time on losers. I give them credit where it's due. Leila Tiabji says, what amazes me is that there were 3 pregnancies in 2 countries with 1 miscarriage and 2 babies born, and not a single doctor, midwife, nurse, hospital patient, or staff member has come forward, despite the worldwide speculation, to give their side of the story. One would have thought that the temptation to make the headlines and dollops of money would have been irresistible. Well, may I point out, in America there are the HIPAA laws, and in the United Kingdom there are equally stringent laws that prevent anybody working in a hospital or in a medical capacity, and that includes the clerical staff and the cleaning staff, is allowed to breathe a word without severe penalties. So it doesn't surprise me that there would be no breach from the medical side of things. We do have one of the doctor's spouses having been reported as having said that neither he nor his wife, who was ostensibly the obstetrician, was in the country at the time of the birth of one of the babies. So we do have that. Hospital staff ruled out. Other patients. Remember Harry's story? Notwithstanding the fact that Meghan was a geriatric mother and had to give birth not at home but in the hospital because something had gone wrong, they were in and out within 2 hours of the birth, notwithstanding the fact she had had 2 epidurals, according to him. So unless somebody was, and this was in the middle of the night, so the likelihood of any patient or any patient's family seeing them would have been very remote. And in America, you have the birth having taken place ostensibly in Santa Barbara, but the birth certificate being issued in Colorado. And again, whoever gave birth to that child would have had to have been seen by other people. And if it had been Meghan, as Meghan claims it is, and Harry claims it is, they could have been quickly in and quickly out, and nobody would have known that they were there. So it's not beyond the realms of credibility that the leak is not going to emanate from that quarter. I will tell you, people have offered good money for medical records, and they did with Catherine as well, if you recall. And that was crushed very quickly. So, and in the United States of America, you don't only get fined, you can go to prison. HIPAA. The Bard of Linden Hill says, Meghan and Harry don't speak to her father in case he might violate their privacy by speaking to the press. Yet they can't understand why the royal family won't speak to them, because they constantly violate the royal family's privacy by speaking to the press. The lack of self-awareness is stunning. Well, he's dumb and she's a narcissist, so I don't know what you would expect, to be blunt about it all. But yes, the lack of self-awareness is characteristic of narcissism. Narcissists don't have any insight. Hence, the debate, would Meghan even have a regret at 3 o'clock in the morning? And if she did, it would be momentary, and then she'd step on it like an elephant stepping on an ant. And also, Harry and Meghan are wildly inconsistent. They are practitioners of the double standard taken to the nth degree. What is condemnatory where they are concerned for you and me is commendable when they are enacting the exact same behavior. And Thomas Markle has never betrayed any of Meghan's confidences. Let's remember that. Thomas Markle has also never betrayed anything compromising about his ex-wife Doria. Let's remember that as well. And Thomas Markle is fully aware of the fact, because I told him, so I know that he's fully aware of the fact. What Meghan, according to somebody who phoned me up at the time I was writing the first edition of Meghan and Harry, the real story, that Harry, according to this person, had told that Meghan could not ever associate with her father again because of interference, which was clearly untrue. I knew it at the time, and Harry confirmed it when he said on the Netflix show that, but for me, Meg would have her father. Well, the wild inconsistency again. But Harry and Meghan just don't seem capable of understanding that words don't only have the meaning they intend to convey, as they are using words the way a painter uses the paint on a paintbrush to paint a picture. Words also have meaning that go beyond and transcend the ordinary manipulative device that Harry and Meghan deploy and employ while trying to paint us into a corner with their lies. They don't understand that those same words also have other meanings, because we can see beneath the manipulation to the underlying reality. They don't understand it because they are so deficient as human beings and defective in their judgments that they cannot see what is blindingly obvious to anybody with discernment and sound reason. So yes, the lack of self-awareness is stunning, but it's not surprising because narcissists have no insight. They're never wrong, but there is always the impulse driving them, their feelings of inadequacy and inferiority and insecurity and uncertainty. And they overcompensate and become overconfident over this, over that. The one thing they're never over is over themselves. Never. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. Okay? Thank you so much. Take good care. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and Godspeed. Bye-bye.